everyone, Shalom and welcome back. The Rebbe had a special interest and love of children. It's interesting because the Rebbe and his wife never had any children throughout their entire marriage. But when it came to children, this was something very, very special in the Rebbe's heart. And he devoted himself completely to teaching children, to educating children, to creating institutions for children. As a matter of fact, as it's known, the Rebbe did not travel outside of Crown Heights except on limited times when he went to the grave of his father-in-law in Queens, which he did quite regularly. But other than that, he never traveled. He never went anywhere. He never went to Israel. He never visited any of the Chabad houses that he established over the years, nothing at all, with one exception. And that was in the 1960s, some 10, 11 years after he became Rebbe. He wanted to go to the Catskill Mountains to visit Camp Gan Israel, Chabad's new summer camp for boys in the mountains. And this was a 3.5-hour trip all the way out there. It was quite an experience. The only time he ever went, and remarkably, it was quite an event, So the Rebbe was responsible for establishing many institutions for children, especially for children, such as Camp Gan Israel. And he established Camp Emunah for girls, also in the Catskill Mountains, and later other camps, Camp Pardes Chana, and many other camps for boys and for girls, for college students and others. In addition to that, he established one of the largest youth programs in the world, Tzivos Hashem, the Army of Hashem, which exists to this day with hundreds of thousands of young boys under the age of bar mitzvah who compete for prizes and for ranks from private all the way up to general. And in so doing, they encourage the children, both boys and girls, to do mitzvahs and to learn Torah and to really act in a Jewish way. And Tzivos Hashem is a very, very popular movement. In addition to that, the Rebbe urged his followers to establish schools, both Talmud Torahs and day schools. Early on, also soon after he became Rebbe, he established a program called Release Time, where children who go to public school would be released for certain hours after school and meet in synagogues or in halls for religious education. This was permitted according to the laws of New York, and when Rabbi Kunin came to California, he started doing it in Los Angeles as well. Release Time became a very popular thing. Many kids became religious because of Release Time. And it was a very, very special program in the Rebbe's heart. The Rebbe established preschools and cheters, Talmud Torahs, afternoon schools, from all of his Chabad houses. In fact, when a Chabad house started, one of the first things they started was a Hebrew school, an afternoon Hebrew school for public school children, and preschools. Unlike many other Jewish organizations, for example, if a kollel from some yeshiva would come into a town, and for a number of years they would get themselves settled, and eventually they would start a high school. Most Jewish organizations love high schools, and they would encourage the establishment of high schools, because after all, a high school student studies on a higher level, and perhaps many of these yeshiva graduates prefer a student on a higher level. We could sit and teach them a page of Talmud, some Mishnayos, things like that, rather than teaching 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds or 4-year-olds in a little preschool. But interestingly, the Rebbe urged that we start preschools, specifically preschools. Many of these preschools developed into day schools and into high schools as well. But virtually every Chabad house, their goal is to start a preschool. Why a preschool? Because you can influence a child from the youngest of ages, and that influence will stay with them literally forever. Literally forever. So the idea of a preschool is an extremely important thing. Chabad houses all over the world have programs for children, and all of our special projects and I'm getting to the Sikha in a minute, but all of our special projects are so devoted to children. If you think about it, we're coming into Rosh Hashanah. One of the most popular programs Chabad offers at Rosh Hashanah is the Shofar Factory, showing children how to make their own shofar. I have in my house a closet full of shofars that my children made over the years. And then comes Sukkah, so we have the Sukkah Mobile, which is for adults also, but children really get a kick out of it. Seeing a Sukkah on a truck, schlepped around the city, and getting to come into the truck and to make the blessing Lulav Esrog under the Sukkah that's established there. Of course, Simchas Torah, the singing and the dancing really appeals to children. Later in the year, Hanukkah, we have our olive oil presses, and Purim, we have our Purim parties, and for Pesach, we have our matzah bakeries, and Shavuos, which is my favorite, has our ice cream kiddush. And why do we have an ice cream kiddush? To influence and to encourage the children to come and to hear the Ten Commandments being read in the synagogue. And the ice cream kiddush has become a major part of every Shavuot celebration, not just in Chabad, but everywhere. So we do these different projects all over, really to encourage the children, to get the kids involved, and perhaps because of that, we're so popular and so successful in getting children involved. Now this Sikha that I'm going to be learning with you was said actually to the campers of Camp Amunah, the girls' Chabad camp in the Catskills, on today, the 7th day of Elul, in the year 1990. And the Rebbe talked to the campers. It's interesting, what he would do is, all the boys and all the men would go upstairs into the women's section in 770 in the Chabad headquarters, and all the girls and their counselors would all come downstairs, and the Rebbe would walk in, and he would speak to all the girls and all the female counselors who were there, and only they were allowed to come downstairs. You can imagine the scene. And interestingly, the Rebbe would speak on topics that they could relate to. So, this Sikha, the Rebbe starts off, he said it's customary. First of all, he says it's a Jew's love of God must permeate throughout every aspect of his behavior. Again, he's talking to children, even those which are involved with material things. For example, by reciting a blessing over eating, or by reciting the Shema, we show how love of God permeates even those basic human activities. And in fact, in virtually every one of the gatherings of children, what we would call children's rallies, they had many of them, in Crown Heights and in other places as well, an important part of it was giving the children something to eat. Because again, kids love something to eat. They enjoy that. And he would give them we'd give them some snacks and make a bracha with them. So the children would see that you make a bracha on a candy, on a fruit, on something like that. You made brachas on these things. Similarly, a Jew's love must be expressed in every aspect of our thought, our speech, and our action. We must think only about God and express the thought in our everyday conduct. And again, the Rebbe is speaking to the children. And above is particularly relevant to girls. He's talking to a group of girls who have spent the summer in Camp Amunah. It's interesting, the name of the camp is Camp Amunah, which means faith. Amunah means faith in God. And thus will illuminate their homes with the light of faith, which was strengthened here. And how many girls came home after camp, and boys also, and they taught their parents all the things they learned in camp, about saying brachas and keeping kosher and keeping Shabbos. They learned all these things and they brought them home, because many of the children who came to these camps did not come from observant families. They came, and all the counselors were observant, and the counselors established a close relationship with the children and taught the children and guided the children, and the relationship of the counselors with the children in many cases stayed throughout their entire life, by the way. I personally was the head counselor in Camp Gun Israel in Detroit, Michigan, in the boys' camp, Detroit, Michigan, the summer before I was married, some 44. I still have connection with so many of those kids and so many of the counselors and the waiters from that summer. We still keep in contact with each other after all of these years. And many people come up to me and they say, "Oh, hey, you were my head counselor over there. I remember that summer." The Rebbe points out, our sages relate the prophet Habakkuk came and based the totality of Torah and mitzvahs on faith alone, faith and Emunah. Similarly, your experience in Camp Emunah should reinforce your fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs in the entire year to come. Interestingly, the Rebbe used to speak in Yiddish. When he spoke publicly, he only spoke in Yiddish. He never said a sikha in any other language. Why was that? I always wondered that. I attended so many of the sikhas of the Rebbe myself in New York, and I wondered how many people really understood what the Rebbe was saying. Of course, they all did because there were translators there, and the sikhas were transcribed in the languages. In New York, after the Rebbe would say a few words, Rabbi Hecht would stand up and he would explain it to the children in English. So the children could understand what the Rebbe was saying. But why did the Rebbe use Yiddish? And I think the reason is because Yiddish is a Jewish language. And the Rebbe wanted to keep that connection of Yiddish to the children and show the children that Yiddish and Yiddishkeit, Judaism and Jewishness, is still very much alive. The Rebbe says, it is customary to connect these gatherings with a lesson from the weekly Torah portion. This week's Torah portion, Parshas Ki Tetzei, contains a lesson which is uniquely relevant to Jewish children. The portion begins, when you go out to war on your enemies, Ki Tetzei lemelchama al ovecha, and you shall take captives. V'shavis shivya, you shall take captives. Now the Rebbe says on the surface, the expression on your enemies, when you go out to war on your enemies, is problematic. Seemingly the Torah should have said, with your enemies. Ki melchama im ovecha, with your enemies, or neged einecha, against your enemies. But it says al ovecha, on your enemies. By using the word on, however, the Torah teaches us that we are above our enemies. We are always above our enemies. And what is the great enemy of the Jew? The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. Each Jew, and in particular Jewish children, should know that although we are still in exile and are the smallest among the nations, Atem Hama'at B'Kol Ha'amim, you are the smallest of all the nations, we are not the largest group, we still have the power not to be intimidated by the non-Jews around us. We are above them. We are higher than them. We should not think that we should be, we are at their mercy. Although one lives in a city, in a neighborhood, and perhaps in a building where most of the inhabitants are non-Jews, one need not be influenced by them. So we are above that. We are above influences. Just because we don't listen to their music, or we don't eat their food, or participate in many of their activities, doesn't mean that we have to be influenced by them at all. Quite the contrary, we are above that. We are much higher than that. I remember a cute story that Rabbi Manis Friedman told once, that he said that there was once a group of young people who came to see him. And he asked them, so where have you been? Where did you go today? Where did you have lunch? And they said, we went to a pizza shop. And obviously these people were not religious, and it was not a kosher pizza shop. I don't know where it was, but it was not a kosher pizza shop. And he said, really, what happened? They said, well, everybody ordered pizza, and except for me. And how did it go? The waiter said, what will you have? And they said, one person said, I'll have pepperoni. Pepperoni is a type of meat that they put on the cheese pizza. And the other person said, pepperoni. And the other one, pepperoni, pepperoni. Finally they came to me, and what did I say? I said, cheese. Just cheese. Well, it wasn't kosher, but it wasn't pepperoni. So everybody looked at me and they said, huh? Why don't you want pepperoni? Everybody has pepperoni on pizza. And he thought and he said, well, I'm a vegetarian. Oh, that's pretty cool. A vegetarian, wow. It's pretty cool being a vegetarian. Very nice. So I had my pizza, they had their pizza. Isn't that fun? So he says, isn't that funny? I told him I'm a vegetarian. Rabbi Friedman said, no, you missed a wonderful opportunity to teach them about kosher. Why didn't you tell them you're not having pepperoni because you don't have meat and cheese on pizza? It's not kosher. Why didn't you say that? He said, well, because I was embarrassed. So Rabbi Friedman said, yeah, but you had an opportunity to tell them, I don't eat it because it's not kosher, not because you don't eat pepperoni. So we should take advantage of the fact that we are Jewish and we are guided by traditions of Jewish law, which are handed down from Moses at Mount Sinai. And we should not be ashamed of acting in the way we are. On the contrary, we should live with them in peace, with non-Jews in peace, for all the Torah's ways are peace. But yet, be cognizant that the Jews' faith is different from all other nations. We are different than them. Therefore, if a Gentile asks a Jew why he does not partake of his food, a Jew should explain the following to him. He should say like this: each creation has a mission of their own. For example, in the human body, the head and the heart, the hands and the feet all perform different functions. Similarly, God has charged non-Jews with one set of mitzvahs, which are the 7 laws of Noah. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, etc. And his descendants. And Jews are given another set of mitzvahs, namely the Torah's 613 commandments. So we are, it's not that we're better or worse than anyone else, we are different from each other. And God granted us this ability to act differently than others. And you know, many of the mitzvahs, so many of the mitzvahs of the Torah emphasize the difference between Jews and Gentiles. Jewish people pray differently. We pray in Hebrew, we pray 3 times a day, we go to shul, we go to church, we go to synagogue rather than church. We observe our holidays differently, we have different holidays, and we look differently. We have a beard, we have a yarmulke, we have tzitzis, we dress modestly, and so on and so forth. Our language is Hebrew or Yiddish. We act differently. We have different music that we listen to, and many of the mitzvahs are reflected on that. For example, we don't drink wine of non-Jews because it could lead to intermarriage and intermingling among Jews and Gentiles. Many don't eat the cheese of non-Jews as well, or the oil of non-Jews. In olden days, they only used oil that was produced by Jewish people, even though other oils might even be kosher, because we want to differentiate, because non-Jews and Jews very often mingle, and what do they do when they mingle? They drink wine, they have oil which they partake of differently, they eat cheese, which is a very popular item as well. People have wine and cheese. So the Torah wanted to discourage mingling, intermarriage, and socializing a lot with Jews and Gentiles because of what it could lead to, namely intermarriage. So we should not think that we are doing this because we're necessarily better than them, but we are doing it because we are different, and God has given us a different purpose in this world. And that purpose is reflected through the 613 mitzvahs. He continues, when a Jewish child sees a non-Jew eating non-kosher food and observes that it contributes to his health, his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, who is the Jew's true enemy, will try to convince a child that this food will be good for him, as well. In other words, the Yetzer Hara says, listen, that is a good, healthy food to eat. You should eat that food. But it's the Yetzer Hara which is telling us that. You know, these days during the summertime, we see the ice cream trucks. You know, you go to the beach or you go to parks, and you see ice cream trucks going up and down the beach or traveling throughout the park. And if you're with children, it can be very tempting to for the children to say, "Oh, why can't I have one of those ice cream bars? Look at all the other kids are having the ice cream bar or the ice cream cone." You explain to them it's not kosher. Oh, it's not kosher. Okay, so that's that. I remember a cute story that I was once in a store, not just a regular grocery store, and I saw a black woman with a young child, and the child wanted to have some candy that was on the shelf, and her mother said you can't eat it, it's not kosher. And I was surprised by that, so I went up to her and I said to her, "Excuse me, madam, are you Jewish?" And she said, "No, not at all." So I asked, "Well, why did you say it's kosher?" She said, "Well, I'll tell you, because if I tell my child you can't have the candy, you're not allowed to have the candy, it's close to dinner time, or it's not good for your teeth," they'll yell and scream, as they used to do that. You yell and scream and say, "Oh, I want it, blah, blah, blah." But I saw Jewish children with their parents, and as soon as they said it's not kosher, children didn't say anything, didn't complain about anything. Fine, it's not. So I figured with my child also, I'll say it's not kosher, and that's it. Nothing more to talk about. So it's something has to do with kosher. I was with my grandchildren a few days ago, and we saw one of these ice cream trucks, and one of the kids said, "Oh, can we get some of the ice cream?" And I said, "It's not kosher." Okay, that's it. Not kosher. Can't eat it. Nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about. One time we saw an ice cream truck, and we looked around, and we saw, and I asked the guy who had the truck, "Do you have anything kosher, anything with a kosher symbol on it?" And he showed me one or two items with a kosher symbol. And obviously, it was not the best item that the kids would have wanted, but it was kosher. Kids got it. I got it for the children. They were very happy to get this, even though it was not their first choice, but they got it anyways because they knew that this was something kosher, something that they could eat. He says when a Jewish child, so when a Jewish child sees someone eating non-kosher food, seeing a non-Jew eating non-kosher food, the Yetzer Hara goes along and says, "Yeah, but it's kosher, it's healthy, so that it's okay." Indeed, the Yetzer Hara will try to convince a child that he is his true friend. You should listen to me. Don't listen to your Yetzer Tov. Listen to me. After all, God created him and placed him in the child's heart. So if the Yetzer Hara was not good, why do I have a Yetzer Hara? Therefore, it appears obvious that he has a good inclination. The Yetzer Hara, the bad inclination, is really a good inclination because here it is, it's in my heart. This is the ultimate of evil, to make another person do evil and yet appear as if one is seeking his welfare. So the Yetzer Hara can sometimes appear as very good, and it can try to convince us that something is good for us or something is not bad for us, and we should go ahead and partake of it. But this is a dangerous thing. This is something that we should not listen to. And so the child will ask his parents and teachers, from where will he derive the power to defeat the Yetzer Hara and show him that he is an enemy? The Yetzer Hara is not his friend. Furthermore, the Yetzer Hara is the first to take possession of his heart. Right away, the Yetzer Hara comes first before the Yetzer Tov, before the good inclination. And he does not understand why did God create the Yetzer Hara in the first place. So the Torah portion tells us that actually you are higher than the Yetzer Hara. Now we have inside of us both the good inclination and the bad inclination. And the good inclination is actually a part of God above. It's part of godliness. So why is it that we have both inclinations? I would imagine that the good inclination is much greater than the evil inclination. because after all, it's a part of godliness, and God is greater than anything. Why do we have both of them? And we have a Yetzer Hara. The purpose of the Yetzer Hara is to give us free choice. Without the Yetzer Hara, we don't have free choice. We would only have a good inclination. We'd all be like angels walking around all the time without any choice at all. So actually the Yetzer Hara is actually a good thing because it gives us free choice. It shows us that we can choose, and we should choose the right thing. The Yetzer Hara has different names. The Yetzer Hara is also called the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul. Why is it called the animal soul? Because it is a part of our animal inclination, because of who we are, our physical being. And every inclination of the Yetzer Hara is towards physical things. We want to eat more, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to sleep more, we want to enjoy pleasures of the world, things that are pleasurable to our body. And all of these things are the traits of the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Tov, on the other hand, is full of godliness. And the Yetzer Tov only wants us to do godly things. Just godly things. Now, the truth is, would it be better for us just to have a Yetzer Tov? And the answer is no, obviously not. Why? Because all the mitzvos are connected with the physical world. We take leather from an animal and we make tefillin out of it. We take food and we make it kosher and make a bracha out of it. We take paper and we make a siddur or a chumash out of it. Everything we do is through the physical world. On Shabbos, we have lovely Shabbos meals, which are physical. We dress up in nice clothes, again, physical. So all of the mitzvahs that we have are all connected with physical things. What is stronger, the Yetzer Hara or the Yetzer Tov? So, why are they so equal to each other? Because if they weren't equal to each other, then there would be no choice in the matter. There would be no battle. As the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, it's actually a war among a small city. And the small city, the small city is really the body. And they're fighting for control of the body. Why are they equal? So the Yetzer Hara is based on the physical body. And most people, they enjoy physical things. We want physical things. The Yetzer Tov, on the other hand, is motivated by godly things. So they're both equal. The Yetzer Hara wants physical things and is drawn towards physical things. The Yetzer Tov wants purely godly things. Now, if we were only motivated by our Yetzer Tov, we would probably die because we wouldn't eat, we wouldn't take care of ourselves, we wouldn't go to doctors, we wouldn't take care of our health. Even great rabbis and Rosh Hashivas are wearing masks today because of the virus and taking precautions not to get sick. All of these things are very physical. But in order to not get sick, and in order to serve God properly, you need to take care of your body, obviously. So therefore the Yetzer Hara is just as important as the Yetzer Tov, because without it we would not be able to live, we wouldn't be able to do mitzvahs, and therefore the Yetzer Hara is called also the Satan, and the Satan means in English the Satan. The Satan, unlike Christianity, the Satan is the Yetzer Hara. It's an angel that God brought down to earth to try to dissuade us from doing good things. The word Satan comes from the word Sata in Hebrew, which means to turn aside. As it says, Ein Adam Eis Avera, a person does not do an Avera transgression, Ela Shenichnas Ba Ruach Shtus, unless a spirit of Shtus, Shtuyot, foolishness, comes over him. And the word Shtuyot, foolishness, it comes from the word Satan, because the Satan causes us to turn away from the path of goodness and godliness. So the Satan really isn't a bad guy at all, but the Satan has a job to do, because all angels are good, and their job is to get us to go away from godly things But God doesn't want us to do that. The Satan hopes that he will be unsuccessful at the end, and we will not follow him. That's what he hopes for. By the way, the Yetzer Hara is also called the Malach HaMavos, the angel of death, because ultimately it causes us to be dead spiritually by only following our physical traits. And we see so often that people who follow purely their physical traits and their animalistic desires find that this is not much of a life at all. Today we're finding a high suicide rate, a high overdose rate in terms of opiates and drugs and things like that. There's a high level of promiscuity and adultery in the world. We see what's going on in cities around the world, in Kenosha and Portland, other cities with violence and crimes and murders and all kinds of things. And these are not things that are coming from the good inclination at all. They're coming from the evil inclination. So, the Rebbe says that the Yetzer Hara wants a Jewish child to confront the Yetzer Hara. God grants him an advantage because it's his physical body. Each child loves doing physical things, a lollipop, going swimming, enjoying themselves, having fun. Each Jew is on or above your enemies, as they say. Al oivecha, we're on our enemies. We have the ability to go beyond, higher than our enemy, the Yetzer Hara. Just as in the actual war, the force which is in a higher position has an advantage. In other words, in an army, the army that's on top, that's high up in the hills or the mountains, has an advantage. Similarly, in this conflict with the Yetzer Hara, a Jew must know that there is no reason to be intimidated. He is above his enemy. He is better than his enemy in this regard. He has the ability to overcome his enemy. This grants him the power to continue his service of God, filling every moment of his day with Torah and mitzvahs, without at all being affected by the Yetzer Hara. So often when I meet people in the street and they see me practicing Judaism, they are filled with respect for me. They look at me, they don't look down on me, they respect me for what I do, and they don't put me down at all. I remember when I was in high school, going to a public high school in Toronto, Pesach time, all the Jewish kids, and the majority of the kids who went to my school were Jewish because there weren't any Jewish day schools in Toronto at the time. We would all sit at the tables together and we would have our hard-boiled egg and matzah. And the non-Jews would come over to us and they would see us eating a hard-boiled egg and matzah, which is not exactly a nice salami sandwich. And they would look at us and they'd say, oh, it's probably Passover. They knew it was Passover because of what we ate. We were not ashamed of what we ate. We were proud of it. Yes, we are Jews, and this is what we do. This is indeed what we do. Furthermore, the above-mentioned verse states, you shall take captives. Furthermore, it says, V'shavisa shivya, you shall take captives when you go to war. This can be interpreted, again, he's talking to children, to mean that a Jew has the potential to redeem the captives, which were taken previously by the Yetzer Hara. What does he mean by that? What are the captives that the Yetzer Hara takes? For example, in the previous month, the month of Av, which is not characterized by the same unique potentials as the month of Elul. Elul, of course, is the special month that comes before Rosh Hashanah, the month of Teshuvah, the month of repentance. We go to the shofar, etc. every day. The Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was taken captive by non-Jews. Because we are above our enemies, we have the power to redeem our captives and bring the Beis HaMikdash back to the Jews. So in the month of Av, when the temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av and was taken captives by the non-Jews, we have the ability to take it back. We have the ability to rebuild the Holy Temple and to make Israel ours and make the Holy Temple once again Jewish. And the captives, interesting. It's an interesting concept that the Rebbe brings down. Very often we inculcate non-Jewish captives, so to speak, things that we capture from the non-Jewish world into our lives. We bring their invention, we bring their dress, their form of music, their culture, their philosophy, and in many cases even their religion into our homes. You know, so many of us have television sets, and in the television set you can tune to various channels, and you can get Christian evangelists or Buddhists or all kinds of things like that right in your home. You don't even need to go to church for these things. They're right in everybody's home. You can go and you can see pornography in your home. Now I'm not talking to the children, I'm talking to the adults. You can see all kinds of unsavory values in your home, in your own home, through movies and through discussions on TV stations, and even through news programs. And these things you have captured, and these things they become part of a Jewish child's mind more than ever, even when it comes to biblical stories. You know, by watching a biblical reenactment on television or in a movie, that image of a Moses or of a Joshua or of a King David or a Queen Esther stays in your mind. It's captured in your mind. And when you go and study the original text and you read about Moshe Rabbeinu or Esther on Purim or King David or any of the prophets, you have in your mind a distorted viewpoint of how they looked like or how they acted, things that they did, which were not really the truth. They did not reflect the values of Torah and godliness and mitzvahs that we think they actually did, because our viewpoint has captured an image of them which is really false. And so it is with the non-Jewish values, things that the non-Jewish world sees as appropriate behavior is many cases not appropriate behavior. It's things that we should not emulate, not at all. And quite the contrary, we should only regard values and behavior as truly Jewish values and Jewish behavior. If we don't know what that is, we should ask our rabbis. Ask our rabbi, is this type of behavior, is this appropriate? Is it okay for me to take something without buying it? Or doing certain things on Shabbos which are not really appropriate. I remember as a young kid walking on Shabbos afternoon. I would go to shul and then I'd go home and have lunch. And after lunch, it was sometimes over the summertime especially, it was kind of lonely, nothing to do. So I got this idea to go and take a walk to the library. The library was about a 15-minute walk away from me. I was a young kid, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old. And I decided to go and walk to the library. So I would take off my Shabbos clothes, my white shirt and my Shabbos pants and tie and everything. And I would put on a pair of jeans and, an old shirt. And I'd walk down the street and I'd go towards the library. On my way to the library, I passed by a rabbi I knew, and he looked at me and he said to me, "Moshe, where are you going?" I said, "To the library." He said, why are you dressed like that? I saw you in shul this morning. You weren't dressed like that with jeans on. It's not Shabbos day. It's not Shabbos day. I said, well, I was going to go to the library. I didn't want to look like I was dressed for a bar mitzvah in the library. I wanted to just go looking like everybody else. He said, do me a favor. He said, go home, put on your Shabbos dress. It's still Shabbos. And come to my house and you'll play with my kids. And it's not really appropriate. As I say in Yiddish, it's not appropriate to go dressed like that on Shabbos. Shabbos is Shabbos. And on Shabbos we act a certain way, we dress a certain way, we eat a certain way, we even sleep a certain way. I remember in a yeshiva I studied at in Israel, so it was not a Chabad yeshiva, came Shabbos afternoon, and we all, after lunch, and we all decided to take a nap. Everybody takes a nap, Shabbos afternoon. So I went to my room to take a nap, and what did I see? I saw all the boys are changing into their pajamas. Their pajamas. I said to myself, wearing pajamas Shabbos afternoon? Pasnish, that's not what we do. To wear pajamas on Shabbos afternoon. Of course, I didn't want to get their Shabbos clothes all dirty. When I came to Chabad Yeshiva, the boys also, many of them took a nap in the afternoon. Not as many as in the other yeshiva, I might say, but many of us did take a nap. But one thing they didn't do, and they did not put on their pajamas. And it may seem like a small thing, but it was a big deal. Because Shabbos is Shabbos, and we don't emulate the ways of the non-Jewish world. When they go to sleep, they sleep in pajamas. When we go to sleep, we don't sleep in pajamas. Someone once asked the Rebbe, why your Hasidim don't sleep in the sukkah on Sukkos. Many people sleep in the sukkah as well as eat in the sukkah. And the Rebbe said, sleep in the sukkah? Sleep? My Hasidim, they don't even sleep. When do they have time to sleep? They're too busy doing mitzvahs, learning Torah, helping other Jews make the blessings on Lubavitcher Rebbe. They don't have time to sleep. Never mind the sukkah. They don't sleep even outside of the sukkah. So we need to emulate Jewish values, values that are unique to us and to our heritage and to our people. And when we do that, the world will appreciate that and respect us for it. It is customary to conclude, the Rebbe says, to conclude these gatherings with the distribution of money to be given to tzedakah. And, you know, the Rebbe used to give out very often dollars and to people who would line up to him. And the idea of the dollars was that they should give the dollars to charity. Of course, many people didn't want to do that because they got a dollar from the Rebbe. So what they would do is they would exchange the Rebbe's dollar for another dollar. They would take another dollar from their pocket and give that to charity. In fact, probably more than that. And you can't imagine how many millions and millions of dollars were given to charity in this world in the merit of all those dollars that the Rebbe gave out to people. But besides giving dollars, very often to children, he would give coins. When people would bring their children, when the Rebbe was going to daven mincha, or going back to his office after davening mincha, the parents, mothers, or the fathers would line up their children, or hold them, and the Rebbe would take out of his own pocket coins, nickels, or dimes, or quarters, and he would give each child a coin. Every child he would give a coin to. And they would take the coin, and they would put the coin into the tzedakah box, the charity box. And this way the children were taught to give tzedakah. Now, sometimes the Rebbe would not give one coin to each child. He would distribute 3 coins to the children. And in these cases of these gatherings in New York, they would take hundreds of thousands of coins. They would be distributed to the counselors, who would distribute it to the children according to the instruction of the Rebbe, and they were told to give each child 3 coins. So he says, each of you, and he's announcing to everyone, each of you will be given 3 coins. 3 in Hebrew is a chazakah. You do something 3 times that has a strength to it. He says, 2 of them you should do what you want. Go buy candy, whatever you want to buy with them. 1 of them should be given to tzedakah. You are my agent, the Rebbe said, to give tzedakah with that 3rd coin. And indeed, when we give children charity, when we give children coins to put in the tzedakah, we should encourage them to do that. When we, every day, we should give our children some coins and tell them to put it in a tzedakah box in our home. Of course, every home should have many tzedakah boxes there, and the children should be encouraged at a young age to give tzedakah. And they should see their parents give tzedakah, how important that is. You know, one time, the head of one of the federations, Jewish federations, I believe it was in New Jersey, in New Jersey, the federation in this particular year, many years ago, came to a startling and a sad conclusion that the younger generation were much less charitable than the older generation was. The old-timers gave a lot more to Federation than the younger ones did. So they decided to commission a study. Federations are always making studies. Everybody's making studies. So they made a study to find out what is going on. Why are the newer generation less charitable than the older generation? And what they found was very surprising. They found, first of all, the younger generation was less religious than the older generation, number one. And perhaps that contributed to the fact that they were less charitable, because since they were less religious, they gave less charity. They were more inclined to keep the money to themselves. But more than that, they found a very interesting thing. They found that the older generation used to give charity more at home. When collectors would come to the house, as they very often did, collecting for a yeshiva or a hospital or for poor people or for Israel or whatever it may be, many of you possibly might remember that. You know, these old Hasidim or religious people used to come to our door with their briefcase, and I remember myself, my mother, my father used to write them a check or give them some money, and we, the children, would watch that. We would see that. So we were taught at a young age to give charity. The younger generation, however, interestingly, they never saw this. Their parents, on the other hand, gave charity at the office. They gave charity by responding to a letter in the mail. And their children never saw them giving charity. So their children assumed they never did. And they never learned from their parents about giving charity. And certainly the same will be true for later generations. Now it's very nice that today the local federations and other Jewish organizations, and there's so many of them, Jewish National Fund, and Friends of IDF, and AIPAC, and so many of these organizations do such important work for the Jewish people. There's no question about it. But one of the problems that they all have, and perhaps these organizations should take a lesson for this, is that they're not teaching the children to give charity as well. They're writing a check in their office or at night when the children go to sleep, putting it in an envelope and sending it out in the mail. Or they're doing it now by a credit card even, so the kids see nothing. They see no cash involved. They see nothing at all. So the children can assume, hey, I never saw my parents giving charity, so they didn't give, I'm not giving. When in reality their parents were very generous, but they never saw it. So it's a very important lesson that we should teach our children as well. So the Rebbe encouraged both the children should take 2 of those coins and keep them and enjoy them. And we should indeed, when we give tzedakah for our children, give them a coin, tell them, here, you take this coin, you keep it, and use it with what you want. But this coin, put it in the pushka, put it in the tzedakah box. He says, may this strengthen your fulfillment of the totality of Torah mitzvahs, including the mitzvah of waiting for Mashiach to come each day that he will come. Our longing for Mashiach will hasten his coming. If we really want Mashiach to come, God willing, he'll come. When he sees that Jewish children, their parents, and their teachers desire him to come, he will come sooner, because the children are the mainstays of Jewish life. And we are told the children are the guarantors of the Jewish people keeping the mitzvahs. The Jewish children will be the first ones to see Mashiach, as it says in the prayer Az Yashir, where it says Zeh Kelev Yanvehu. The children looked up at the Red Sea and they said, this is our God, and we will glorify him. Zeh means this. They would point, as the commentaries say, they say, look, there's Hashem right there. Zeh Kelev Yanvehu. And similarly, when Mashiach comes, the children will be the ones to see Mashiach. The children will see godliness in a revealed way, more than the adults will. He says it's customary to conclude such gatherings with singing the nigun, the song Sheyabana Beis Hamikdash, and he encouraged, even though it was a gathering of girls and women, it's not appropriate for men to hear girls or women sing. So he said, we're going to make a slight change, and the chazan will alone sing the nigun. So the girls won't sing it in front of him, in front of the Rebbe, and there were men there also in the women's section. Lots of men were there also. Afterwards, everyone should answer Amen, Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. And through this immersion of Yiddishkeit through the children will take home the influence of the Rebbe and of this gathering. They'll bring it back to their parents, and all of Jewish life will be enhanced through it. So I want to wish you all a good Shabbos, and we'll see you next week on the same station.
Shkoch.